Welcome back. I am John P. Today we are going to be talking about the best Rolex Daytona alternatives of the year 2022. Here's the thing, in watches today, many of us know that it can be extremely difficult to get your hands on a Rolex Daytona, especially the ceramic bezel current generation Rolex Daytona that everyone's really lining up to purchase, whether it's from an authorized dealer or even sometimes in the pre-owned or secondhand market. This is one of the hottest watches out there, if not the absolute hottest watch. Now, it's not only just for the fact that if you can buy one at retail, you can sell it for several times that out on the free market, but it's also because the Rolex Daytona has a very rich history and heritage behind it, the uses of it, the people that have put this watch on their wrist. All of these things together make it such a special watch. But if you are looking to kind of branch out away from the Rolex Daytona, or perhaps the price point is just not palatable for you and where you're at in your watch collecting journey, or there's just something about it and having to pay much over retail just doesn't sit with you very well, all of these alternatives that I'm going to share with you today are great alternatives for the Rolex Daytona. On my wrist today, I actually have a Rolex, but a vintage Rolex. So, don't shame me too much here, but this is the Rolex 1016 Vintage Explorer 1 frogfoot dial. I absolutely love this watch, and you can check out so many cool watches that we have in stock at delraywatch.com. Our team has been working tirelessly to bring you the best watches and some of the best value watches that you can find today, that you can find especially for sale at delraywatch.com. So let's jump right into it. Before we actually jump right into it, I just want to share that there are some criteria that we're going to be using to consider a watch to be a Daytona alternative. There's going to be some feature or aspect about the Daytona that it shares with one of these chronograph watches, or there may be something that actually the Daytona is missing that is in one of these watches, and we'll share it in that way. So for all five of the watches on this list, there's going to be a special feature that sets it apart from the Daytona, but these are not just all going to be Daytona homages or homages that just copied the design. There's going to be some differences. So jumping into it, we have a first watch. Now, this is going to be a rather new entrant to really the watch world in general, and this is going to be for a reason I'm going to share with you. This is a Zen watch, a much younger brand than Rolex, that is for sure, and this is going to be the Zen 103 Classic 12, limited to 600 pieces. Now, what's interesting about this Zen 103 variant is actually particularly with the way that the dial is placed. Now, if you're familiar with the Zen brand, you know that Zen makes watches in Germany to very hard, rugged, durable specifications for sporting. That's what they're known for, and that's why collectors love them, including their approachable price point. The watch in question retailed for about $3,200. Now they're sold out because they only produced 600 pieces, and it's a no-brainer that it did sell out so quickly at retail price because of just the way that it looks. Now, if you look at the watch particularly, you'll notice that it has a similar dial configuration with the 369 in the registers, the sub-dials on the watch for the different chronograph functions. Now, it's different than the typical modern Zen 103 in that the dials are actually typically laid out with the 6-9, 12 o'clock position. So this is much more in line with something you would see from a Rolex Daytona for sure. And in addition, this is something that Zen doesn't do a whole lot today, but I kind of suspect that they're going to start doing this more as ceramic becomes a more popular material and a more desirable and in-demand material in watchmaking today. But Zen actually has the bezel created out of ceramic material on this watch, so it's going to add a lot of rugged durability and long time withstanding proper coloring to the bezel, and it's going to prohibit the watch from actually scratching, which is something that you would get from an aluminum bezel insert. And so that's why ceramic, you see it across the board, including on the Rolex Daytona and now in the Zen watches. So I personally love this watch. Let me know what you think about this particular watch down in the comments below to all you Zen collectors. Now, next we have a watch that when this debuted in the last few years many collectors were entirely up in arms. Many Rolex people completely dismissed this watch and said, you know, I think Zenith completely ripped off the Rolex Daytona. Well, interestingly enough, we have the Zenith Chronomaster Sport. Now, with the Zenith El Primero Chronomaster Sport, you'll notice that overall it looks a lot like the current modern iteration of the Rolex Daytona. Now, of course, there are some color splashes and some changes, and you can also buy this watch on the strap or in stainless steel from Rolex. That's really not the case any longer. You're buying it on the bracelet. Some might put it on a strap, but that's how it does come configured, and Zenith gives you that option. But it's interesting to note that this particular watch with the El Primero movement, it features the movement, a much more updated, much more advanced and sophisticated movement of the movement that Rolex decided to put in their original automatic chronograph watches when Rolex started producing them. Before, there were automatic chronograph watches from Rolex in their chronograph line, including their Daytona. They had hand-wound, manual wind, mechanical movements, and the first place that they went when they wanted to put the automatic movements into their chronographs was to Zenith, and that's why you see today you have Zenith El Primero movement-driven Rolex Daytonas selling for very high premiums because of that interesting touch in the fact that it does put a very sophisticated movement inside of the watches, and collectors really enjoy that. And so that's always kind of my response to those out there that are familiar with kind of that debate that was going on with this particular Zenith watch. But what I love about this watch is it's truly just a fine quality, high-end sports watch. It really is. Now, it's 1 millimeter bigger than the Rolex Daytona current version. That's a 40 millimeter watch. This is a 41 millimeter watch. But I just think that if you don't need the Rolex name on the watch, you love that style, this is an amazing alternative. It has that El Primero movement, and it's really difficult, in my opinion, to kind of discredit this watch in too many ways, because just having held it, it's such a quality, fine watch. You have the movement, the quality is there. Zenith is up and coming, really making a name for itself. If you don't pay over retail, I think you're getting such a great deal on this watch. Do any of you own this watch? I would love to hear about it in the comments below. Now, the next watch, now this is going to be a no-brainer for so many people, but it needs to be on the list, because if I don't put it on the list, so many people are going to leave comments below saying, why is the Omega Speedmaster not on the list? Now, of course, this is the Omega Speedmaster. Now, I would recommend the Omega Speedmaster Professional Traditional Hesalite Crystalled Moon Watch. Now, why I recommend this is because it's the most true version to the original Speedmaster Moon Watch, right? It has the Hesalite crystal. This is the actual material that was used on the watch for the crystal to make it more durable in the event of going to outer space, landing on the moon. This is what this watch is actually known for. Not this current version that's out in stores, but the current version out in stores does have everything that's been updated compared to the original Omega Speedmaster Professional, a long lineage of this model that has gone through so many iterations, and that's something that you don't see in too many watches out there in the market, and that's the biggest selling point for the Omega Speedmaster Professional, in my opinion, is that it has gone through these iterative improvements and changes over time, much like the Rolex Daytona. So looking at the two watches, they don't share a lot of similarities, right? You can look at them. The sizes are not too far off from each other. The Speedmaster Professional is 42 millimeters, whereas the Rolex Daytona is 40, but they're gonna wear somewhat similarly. It's not a huge discrepancy. We're not talking about 6, 7, 8 millimeters in case size there, but they are both chronographs, but they have their own rich history and story behind them. So when talking about alternatives, it's not necessarily, like I said at the beginning of this video, hey, this watch looks like this other watch, but instead it's an alternative, right? It's a different chronograph, and it has that history, which many people do look for in watches and luxury watches and big purchases like these. So something to consider, had to be on the list, the Omega Speedmaster Professional. Now next, this is a watch that I've really come around to enjoy, right? Tudor has a very interesting dial configuration of the Tudor Black Bay chronograph. Now, what makes this watch so special is it actually features the MT5813 Tudor chronograph movement, which is actually the Breitling B01. Something interesting about Breitling and Tudor is that they do share movements between some of the different products that they offer. Some of the watches that they offer source watch movements from the other brand. For example, we're talking here about this particular chronograph sources the B01 movement from Breitling, but Breitling also has some other watches that use the Tudor movement that's used in some of the sports models, such as the Black Bay, originating with the Tudor movement that came out with the Tudor North flag. So it's interesting to note. I think it shows that the reliability there, both brands really believing in each other with the movements, but also this gets you kind of close to that Rolex heritage here at a much lower price point without sacrificing a lot of quality. Now, to most people, the quality between the Tudor chronograph and the Rolex is going to be negligible difference. Now, Tudor's not putting all their watches through the same stringent testing that Rolex goes through, but certainly more than enough and more than being sufficient. And of course, these are not going to be watches that are going to just break on you, right? They're still going to be really rugged and durable, but the production of the watches do lack some of the things that Rolex claims to really go above and beyond, making it that true luxury product. These are going to be very rugged, durable tool watches, a lot like what a Rolex originally was intended to be. You know, even though many people still use Rolex watches for tool watches, I think it's very safe to say that when the Rolex Daytona is selling out in the open market at several times the retail price, it's become much more of an asset / luxury good status symbol, or really a toy at that matter, depending on how you look at it, than a tool watch, which I truly do believe that Tudor was able to kind of take that positioning and run with it very well. And so this Tudor chronograph, I really could recommend it so much. We've had them in the door at Delray Watch. I really enjoyed them. I think they're fun, and it seems like a nice watch that would be rugged and durable and really take that positioning, like I said, for the original intent of the Daytona, which is more of a tooling watch. Now last, this is going to be a watch with an interesting complication or a version of a chronograph that you're not going to really see from the Rolex Daytona line. I don't know that you'd ever see it, but this isn't a feature that you would get in the Rolex Daytona, and this is going to be the Carl F. Bucherer Monero flyback chronograph, coming in at the $6,300 price point, much lower than the Rolex Daytona. Now, yes, the watch does not look a lot like the Daytona. I get that. But what I'm showing here is the interesting type of chronograph that Carl F. Bucherer is putting into this Monero flyback, and that is the flyback mechanism. Now, the flyback mechanism, I think, is just so cool, and it allows the watch wearer or user to time so many more different types of things that are happening, such as laps, right? So the whole point of the flyback chronograph is that you don't need to stop and then reset the chronograph hand. You can push the button and the hand is going to literally fly back and start keeping time again. So many people like the flyback feature for different things like laps or racing or you name it, because it doesn't need that stopping time to stop and reset. It can just kind of pick up and keep going. And when you're talking about timing certain things, precision is everything, right? When we're talking about watches, I'm sure I'll see in the comments below, so many people want their watches to be within a couple seconds per day, and that's reasonable. So when you see a function like this in aiding in the timekeeping and timing of certain events, I just think that's so cool, and that's just something that you're not going to see from the Rolex Daytona, but that you would see at a watch here. And Carl F. Bucherer, in my opinion, is very underrated. This is a brand that I don't see a lot of people talking about, and they sell at such steep discounts that almost sometimes it seems too good to be true, because the quality far outweighs the price that these watches sell for out on the market. As someone that's collected so many watches and has sold so many watches through Delray Watch, I've handled this watch personally so many times, and the prices that we sell them for, just whatever the market price is at the time, 40, 50% under the retail price, I scratch my head, right? Because you can't buy, so many watches of lesser quality than the prices we're selling these watches at sometime. Now, we don't have this watch in stock. We have in the past, so this is in no way, related to us. Just sharing with you that I have held this watch, and I really like this one. It's special If it was a little bit smaller, I would probably have one of these watches or versions of it in my collection, but at 43 millimeters, about 43 millimeters, it's a little bit too big for my wrist, but for those of you looking for a little bit bigger of a chronograph with a special function, the flyback, I think this is a great option and an awesome Rolex Daytona alternative. But what do you guys think? In the year 2022, are there any chronographs that you think give either Rolex a run for their money or perhaps are just great alternatives for those that are just not willing to play the game, so to speak? Let me know in the comments below. Guys, please do not forget to thumbs up, like, and subscribe. I really do appreciate it. You can check out delraywatch.com as well as you can find me on Instagram, TheRealJohnP. Thanks, guys. You've been chatting with John P.